I'd like to begin by wishing you a Happy New Year, as today's Samhain started last night and it's still going, so a Happy Celtic New Year. Yeah. It's a time of new beginnings, and I think in the traditional New Year's we always think of beginnings, but what we sometimes don't realise that every moment is a new beginning. So even this moment now, is we're sitting here gathered together, is a new beginning. And we're here to talk about the labyrinth. And the labyrinth is also a form of beginning, because to interact with the labyrinth you have to step into it. And so just as the labyrinth has an opening, many labyrinths are circular in shape with just one opening, which creates a path from the outside to the centre. So you are also being presented in your life with openings, gateways and doorways. Always, if you're aware enough to see them. And it's that issue of awareness that has brought me to the labyrinth 14 or 15 years ago and has kept me engaged with the labyrinth. Because for me, the labyrinth raises your awareness, raises my awareness. In fact, I probably wouldn't be here if I didn't follow just what at the time was a very slight piece of guidance. I felt one day 15 years ago that I should go and visit this health shop. I just got a feeling I should go there, even though I had been there 2 days earlier. I didn't know why, but I followed my intuition. I said, if I get a parking space nearby, I'll go in and see. There was a parking space right outside the door. I went in, walked around the shop, couldn't see what was drawing me there. And then they had a notice board with many different events, mind, body, spirit events, and then another place with lots of leaflets. And I picked up one of these leaflets. It was a booklet about book reviews. And there was something in it that really struck me. And I hadn't much time, so I took one or two of these booklets home with me, and one of them had the name and address of a lady on the back. And I was looking for like-minded people who were into meditation, so I actually wrote her a letter. And she phoned me back, because I gave her my phone number, and she said, I have a meditation group every Sunday evening, would you like to come along? So I started going there. One evening she had a dream workshop. And I started talking to this lovely lady at that dream workshop, who is now my wife. Fionnuala one evening asked me would I like to pick from her deck of angel cards, a deck by Angela McGurr. And I picked a card, and it was called Melchizedek's Labyrinth. And that was the first labyrinth that I remember seeing in this lifetime anyway. But yet, and it's set me on a path of exploring the labyrinth, meditating on it, interacting with it, learning. The more I learn, the more I realise how little I know about it, because there are depths and dimensions to the labyrinth that are wider, deeper and higher than I have yet to achieve. But yet, if I had not followed that slight bit of guidance and intuition to go and visit that health food shop, I would not be here. You probably would not be here. And so that's an example of the slightest opening that can appear in your life, that you don't know where it's going to take you, but you know you have to go through that opening. It's like when you walk out the door here this evening, are you going to turn left or turn right? Neither of them is right or wrong, but yet they will both have different opportunities and learnings for you. So the opening that the labyrinth is presenting to you is, are you going to step into it? Because the labyrinth has an energy and a vitality and a vibration that is much higher than we live in most of the time. The labyrinth has been used in many different societies down through the ages for many different activities that are not only intriguing, but they're mystifying. Batak priests in Sumatra in Indonesia had folded out books of their magic spells. Some of them contained labyrinths. An inscription beside one of them says, use this symbol to protect against harmful people and evil spells. Back 500 years ago in Lapland, shepherd boys who were herding reindeer would build a labyrinth to protect their reindeer herds against wolverines. All around the Baltic coast you will find about 400 labyrinths used by fishermen who understood that trolls or evil spirits travel in straight lines, so they would walk the labyrinth before they went on the fishing trip, run back out, and anything that was followed them would get caught up in the coils. Labyrinths have been used on thresholds as a protection symbol. In Tamil Nadu in India, they paint kolam, different patterns and designs on the threshold. Some of these are labyrinths. Also in parts of India, in the early stages of childbirth, some women had the practice of tracing a labyrinth path in powdered saffron on a steel plate to reduce the pangs of the early stages of childbirth. Even here in England, there's a labyrinth called a Tristone on a piece of slate. It's in Boscastle, in the Museum of Witchcraft in Boscastle in Cornwall. And the wise women would trace the path of the labyrinth in and out, chanting a Gauld or incantation, to bring them to a higher state of consciousness and awareness, so that they could access the information they needed for the people they were working with. When you put all of that together, the labyrinth is presenting us with something that we may not fully understand, but that we know is beneficial. It has an energy, it has a vibration. In fact, I have measured people's auras before they walked the labyrinth, after they walked it, and it's doubled in size. I've even recently measured people's auras before and after they traced a finger labyrinth. Just a small pattern of a labyrinth. Don't even have to walk it. And also their energy field and their aura has expanded. The labyrinth raises your vibration. People who interact with the labyrinth find that they feel more centered and balanced. Many people have emotional releases on the labyrinth because they're entering into an ancient symbol that's of a higher vibration. It's raised their vibration. Anything that's of a lower vibration cannot last in that higher vibration. It has to go. So people have healings on the labyrinth. The more you work with the labyrinth, the higher your vibration will become, the clearer you will become. So again, the question is, are you going to step into the labyrinth? The labyrinth could be, it may be a step like the fool in the tarot stepping off the cliff. Or it may be you stepping into your wisdom as the wise one stepping into the greatness of your future self. Because the book, Labyrinth, Your Path to Self-Discovery, is about interacting with the labyrinth so that you discover who you really are. So the first thing that starts to happen with people who interact with the labyrinth is they start feeling more centered, more balanced. The classical labyrinth has 7 circuits, 1 for each of your chakras. So as you move through the labyrinth, you're moving through your chakras in a particular order, and consciously or unconsciously, you're aligning yourself. You're becoming more at one with yourself. When you're more at one with yourself, then you can become more at one with others. You can become more at one from there with the world around you. The classical labyrinth has even been used to illustrate the 7 visible heavenly bodies. So you start becoming more at one with the cosmos, and then more at one with all of existence. See, the labyrinth has many names. The classical labyrinth. On the cover of the book is a replica of a labyrinth from Chartres Cathedral in France, 800 years old. But the labyrinth goes back much, much further. This is the classical labyrinth, sometimes called the Cretan labyrinth. The oldest known of these are rock carvings in Galicia, in northern Spain, and Valcamonica Valley in Italy, but also 4,000 or 5,000 years old in Goa in India. This same rock carving has been found on the Hopi Indian Reservation in northern Arizona. Been found all over the world. That pattern has been found on old wooden Muslim mosques in Pakistan and Hindu temples in India. Rock carvings in Ireland, all over Europe, and found all over the Baltic. So there is something about the labyrinth that draws us in. There is something about the labyrinth that intrigues those of us who are becoming interested in it. I mentioned the tarot already, but the tarot, the labyrinth, alchemy are all different paths of spiritual advancement. And yet the labyrinth resonates with the tarot. I have mapped the 22 major arcana onto the labyrinth, so that as you're interacting with the labyrinth, one of the layers you're interacting with is the path of the fool, or the wise fool. Alchemy has 7 stages, each one higher level of purification, to move from the lead of your base being to the gold of an enlightened being. There are 7 turns in the labyrinth, mirroring the stages of alchemy. In fact, when you move through the labyrinth and the order in which it brings you through your energy centers or your chakras, you are creating, first of all, grounding yourself from your 3 lower chakras, which in alchemy is sometimes referred to as the lesser work, or the spiritualization of the body, to the heart which sits between them. And then you go to your top 3 chakras and bring down the divine light. But you can only do that when you're first grounded, and the labyrinth grounds you first. Brings you to your heart, which is between the earth and heaven, and then brings you into contact with the light. In fact, it creates a cup of your energy body. A cup that looks like the Holy Grail. Energetically, if you're wondering what the Holy Grail is, you are it. But the labyrinth needs to be experienced. In my book and in all of my events, I always say there are 3 aspects to them, and 3 aspects to any path of spiritual or personal growth. One is knowledge, learning about it, reading about it. Second one is experience. Experiencing some aspect of that spiritual path or personal development path that resonates with you. And when taking time is the third one, to reflect on how both of them interact and merge so that you can move on to the next step. But the labyrinth, even speaking about the labyrinth, it raises our awareness. Even the energy in this shop here has shifted in the last 5 to 10 minutes since I started talking. There is what I would describe as a heightened awareness in this group of us just here. The energy of the labyrinth comes when we talk about the labyrinth. There's a powerful healing energy in the labyrinth. It's inviting us to interact with it, inviting us to step into and step onto our path of self-discovery. And every path starts with one step. What is your next step? It has to be from here. When I worked in an office with a desk and a big open office, many people, I had a few inspirational quotations in front of me. One from the Baal Shem Tov, the Jewish mystic, and which said, "If not you, then who? If not here, then where? If not now, then when?" We are all being called to be here now, not to be somewhere else, to be here. And the labyrinth brings us to a heightened sense of awareness wherever we are. But we don't get enough of opportunity in our everyday lives to be in the silence. We don't get enough of opportunity to listen to ourselves, to listen to our inner self. The path of the labyrinth is a path from the outside to the center, to your center. But not only to your center, to the center of all of existence. It's a winding path. There are many twists, there are many turns in it. But each twist and turn is bringing you closer to the center. Each twist and turn is reflective of some twist or turn in your life that you have taken or that you are about to take. Sometimes your life takes a turn and you feel that you're further away from your center than you've ever been before. You're wondering what's happening. But then your life takes a turn, just as another turn of the labyrinth, and it brings you closer to the center, and you feel, yes, you're back on track, but you're always on track. Because things do not happen to you, they happen for you. When you shift your thinking away from things happening to you to happening for you, then you're open to receiving the learning. Doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's always going to be comfortable. But once you're able to observe what is happening in your life from outside and saying, okay, this is happening for me, what's the learning? Then you are halfway there to knowing and receiving that learning. The labyrinth path also reflects the path of Mithraism, which was a religion back in the Roman times. There were 7 stages in that, just as there are 7 stages in or turns and circuits in the labyrinth. The labyrinth is a symbol of you. So when you step into the labyrinth, you're stepping into yourself. I've mentioned your 7 energy centers, reflected in the 7 circuits of the labyrinth. There are 4 quadrants in the labyrinth. Each one of them an aspect of you. Let's call them earth, the 4 elements, earth, air, fire and water. You'll find them in the labyrinth. But when you walk the labyrinth, you're moving through them in varying orders. You end up rotating the elements. Rotation of the elements is found in alchemy. But when you move through the 4 elements in different rotations, you come in contact with the 5th element, the quintessence, spirit. You touch on your own essence. The spirit within you, that is the spirit of everything. The symbol of the labyrinth, drawing it. When you draw the labyrinth, you start with a cross. But when you separate and rotate that symbol, and it's illustrated in the book, and reassemble those 4 elements, you end up with a square and a circle with a dot in the middle, which is the alchemical symbol for gold. The labyrinth is your path to the goal of an enlightened being. It's your path to self-discovery. I was walking a labyrinth many years ago in Cork in Ireland, where I'm from, and there was a labyrinth festival, for want of a better word, and they were painted on the streets, sides of the street. And I was walking this labyrinth, and this elderly gentleman was passing by, and he stopped, and I could see him out of the corner of my eye looking at me. And he caught my eye and he loudly declared, "It's a dead end," he says. "It's a dead end." And I smiled, I kept going. Because sometimes, when you look, first of all, the center of the labyrinth can seem like a dead end. The path stops at the center. It depends on how you look at it. Because the end of one thing is always the beginning of something else. I have stood in the center of my own labyrinth in my back garden. Sometimes it felt like nothing was happening. Other times I've had amazing experiences. I've stood there one time and it was as if the ground started slowly moving, breathing, up and down, and I was moving up and down. And the ripples were running out through the labyrinth. And it took me to another dimension. The center of the labyrinth is not an end, it's a doorway. And that doorway brings us back to where we started, to the openings that are being presented to you in your life if you're aware enough to see them. And the greatest tool I have found for raising my awareness is the labyrinth. When you walk the labyrinth, it quietens your mind. When your mind is quiet, your awareness is heightened. And when your awareness is heightened, then you are open to receiving the guidance, the insights that are coming to you. So even though this talk may be coming to an end, or is it a beginning? We are living on the edge of creation. The labyrinth is a tool for humanity to advance. It is a bridge between heaven and earth, a stepping stone from here to there. It is calling people to interact with it. It is calling those of us here to live on the edge, to live at the forefront of creation, where every thought we have, every word we speak, and every act we carry out are new. So in every moment we have a choice to contribute to the advancement of our human family. I leave you on that note. Thank you very much for listening. To relate the labyrinth that you will walk, which can be 10, 15, 20, 30 feet wide, to a small finger labyrinth, they both have the same effect because you're interacting with a sacred archetypal symbol, the energy of which is in that symbol. So whether you trace it with your finger or whether you walk it, it has the same effect. It has the effect of raising your vibration, as I said, and heightening your awareness. You can get finger labyrinths with grooves in them that you can do with your eyes closed. And eyes closed is wonderful, but for me at this stage, I think it's time for us to start meditating with our eyes open so that we can see what's around us, or as a teacher of mine once said, you can see what's coming at you. For thousands of years we've been meditating with our eyes closed because we needed to go inwards. And we still need to go inwards, but we need to bring that out, what's inside, so that people around us can see. So it's not now all about sitting in silence or in a closed, locked room or in a quiet room with your eyes closed. It's about being in that meditative state all the time. That's where we're moving towards, and that's where the labyrinth brings us. So it's being about aware of being here with your eyes open, being aware of you sitting in the seat, but still being centered and balanced and be able to go from there. With a finger labyrinth, you can do it with your eyes closed all the time, and when you're starting off, I would think that is a good, useful practice. But the labyrinth for me is about becoming more aware of who we are and more aware of what's happening around us. And because it quietens the mind, the act of walking with your eyes open, what it does is it forces the left side of the brain, the logical, rational thinking side of the brain, to focus on a narrow path. And that side of our brain is generally overactive in today's society. There's just so much to do, lists of things to do. We're being bombarded with signals and advertising and mobile phones and everything. But when you walk the labyrinth, you force that thinking part of the brain to follow a very narrow path, which has the effect of quietening it. It's like meditating on a flame or a rose. So, and as the left side of the brain quietens, it allows the feminine, intuitive, creative to come into balance, and you become whole-brained. So many people, one of the magical uses of the labyrinth today, even though it's generally not called that, is that people will often ask a question before they walk the labyrinth, looking for insights into some issue in their life. And many people receive them. I've had small labyrinths at big exhibitions that are noisy, fairly distracting types of places. And I've said to people, say, what do I do? They wouldn't even have seen a labyrinth before. I said, if you have a question, hold it in your mind, walk the labyrinth. And 5 or 10 minutes later, they'll just come back and say, I got my answer. Now, I'm not guaranteeing everybody gets an answer every time. I don't. But the labyrinth meets you where you're at, wherever that is. And the labyrinth meets you at whatever you're ready to let go of. And our first interactions are generally letting go of the baggage we've been carrying with us, the dramas, the stories, the emotions that we've been carrying with us, that it's time for us to let go. It's like endings and beginnings. It's time to let go of some of these, but you can't bring in something new until you create space for it. So for you to step into something new, you need to let go of some of the old. And the labyrinth is a wonderful tool. It's a safe space in which you can do that. There are several differences between walking a labyrinth on your own and walking in a group. Everything that happens on the labyrinth is a metaphor or representative of something that's happening in your life. So too, if you walk with a group of people, that how you see the people behaving or how you see them can often be a reflection of how people in your life, how you see people in your life. So sometimes walking in a group, it's the general advice is you walk at your own pace, because it's first of all about getting fully in touch with yourself. And I will advise people to walk at their own pace and feel free to move around people. But oftentimes you may feel, that there's somebody walking slower in front of you. And yet many people will not pass that person out. They will walk at the pace of the person in front of them. And afterwards, when they realized what was happening, they said, oh yes, there is somebody in my life who is slowing me down, or who is holding me back. Or if you feel there's someone breathing down your neck as they're walking too closely behind you. A lot of times people say they allowed that to happen, even though they could have stopped and allowed the person to pass. So the labyrinth raises our awareness in many different ways, particularly in a group. I was in Chartres in 2005 and I walked with a group. And I had a number of different experiences. The minute my bare feet touched the floor of that 800-year-old cathedral, I was thrown back to memories of a past life in 1288. And of about the 40 people in that group, I recognized each one of them from that time. There was a 4-person group singing, and I could see them in white robes at the time. And I was a 10-year-old boy, and I was getting out of everybody's way to let them pass. I didn't care. I was just happy as a 10-year-old boy. Some people who were observing and who were facilitating the walk said, you looked like a young boy when you were walking the labyrinth. The labyrinth will meet us exactly where we're at. It'll bring you whatever you need at that time, whatever learning is there for you at that time. And I will add, if you're aware enough to see it. It's about awareness. But once you enter the labyrinth, your mind will start quietening. And there's a very strong chance that you will become aware of what your learning on the labyrinth is. When I started interacting with the labyrinth, using the labyrinth, built one in my back garden, I was just walking. I just want to walk for peace. I want to feel happy. I was walking for quite just what I wanted to bring into my life at that time. Seeking happiness, seeking love, seeking joy. So you can interact with the labyrinth in whatever way feels right for you. There is no one right way to interact with the labyrinth. The opening is inviting you to walk through and to see where it takes you. Every point on the labyrinth has a meaning. Every point. I have identified many of them. You can find many of them in the book. So if you stop at a particular point on the labyrinth, it can mean something to you. I had a lady stop at one particular turning point on the labyrinth during a walk I was facilitating. She came to me afterwards and said, I was stuck at that point. I couldn't move on for ages. Eventually I felt it was right to move on. She says, what does that point mean? And I said, that's the point that's related to your relationship with others. It's about your personal boundaries. It's about possibly people drawing too much on you, or now you need to establish your own boundaries because you're the person you are now. And she looked at me and said, wow, she said, I'm just going through a very difficult divorce. So the labyrinth was energizing her to be what she needed to be at that time. And she was aware enough to know that she had to stop. I mean, if you go in very single-minded and say, I'm going to get to the center regardless, well, then you may miss the messages and the insights. You may miss the openings that the labyrinth is presenting to you. It's like if you rush headlong down the street, you may miss many, many things. Same way as the most ancient ones, no. Do some of them work? Yes. So it's a matter of seeing if you're drawn to it and if you have an experience on it, well, then it works. But there are some where the energy maybe is more scattered, or it just doesn't seem to feel right for you. Maybe it's right for somebody else. Maybe it's right for somebody else. But even this pattern, this is the most ancient one that's found in rock carvings, Galicia, northern Spain, Valcamonica Valley in Italy. But it has many names. It's called the classical labyrinth in labyrinth circles. It's called the Cretan labyrinth because it appeared on Cretan coins 2,500 years ago. I've heard it called the Celtic labyrinth. It's also known as Luna's labyrinth. Luna, Roman goddess of the moon. It's also known as Melchizedek's labyrinth because, and that's the first labyrinth I saw, because moving through it, Melchizedek for me holds the cup of consciousness for humanity, and moving through the labyrinth brings your energy body into the shape of a cup where you're grounded. You have a very solid base. Your heart sits on that, the connection between earth and heaven, your heart. And then it creates a cup of your upper energy centers so that you, what's the term I heard this morning? You put on a crown of light and you fill yourself with the light, but you can only do that if you're grounded first. If you go too high, you might stay up there. The labyrinth grounds you because we're meant to be here on earth at this time. We're meant to be here on earth. We came here, each one of us came here for a reason. If you know what it is, great. If you don't, walk the labyrinth and ask the question, what am I here for? But we can only do what we're here to do when we're firstly grounded and then secondly connected and then live and work through the heart. That place of love, that place of non-judgment. And that's what the labyrinth, where it has brought me, and I am no doubt that it will bring anybody who continues to interact with it, to that place of love and centeredness within yourself, from where you are actually no longer an individual, but you are at one with all of existence, you're one with everybody. It has been used to illustrate various different cities down through the millennia and in different cultures. So the Chartres Labyrinth is sometimes referred to as Chemin de Jerusalem or the Road to Jerusalem. The labyrinth has also been used to represent the city of Shimangada in the Himalayas. Oftentimes fortress cities. So Jerusalem, Jericho, you know, when the Israelites from Egypt crossed into Israel for the first time, Troy, which were seen to have almost impregnable walls. But Troy, for example, the great story about Troy is Helen at the center. But Helen, depending on how you look at a story or how you interpret it, Helen can be the divine feminine or the feminine within each one of us that we each need to become in contact with. But yet, because of society, we have built these walls around ourselves to have this strong macho image, so that those walls need to be broken down for us to access the feminine. In the Ramayana, in that great Indian epic, let me get the names right, I think Rama kidnapped Sita and took her to the center of his fortress. And again, if we look, it's the masculine and the feminine, the overpowering masculine trying to conquer the feminine. But yet, she was released with the help of Hanuman, the monkey god. The feminine is always there in the labyrinth. So even Jericho, which is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, where the Israelites they had to get past Jericho, but it was a strongly fortified city, and they were told to circle the city 7 times, and on the 7th day to circle it once for 7 days and 7 times on the 7th day, and then to use their voice and to blow the horns and the trumpets. And when they did that, the walls of Jericho fell and they were able to enter. But when you move through the labyrinth, the last chakra or energy center that you access is your throat chakra. It's the sound. You can only fully speak your truth when all of your other energy centers are in alignment and balanced. So from a place of power, using your creativity, grounded, from a place of love with a divine connection, using your intuition, then and only then can you speak. So Jericho has often been illustrated as a labyrinth in manuscripts because of this story. But the message to us is that we can only speak our truth when we're fully aligned and fully in balance.